Hello and welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's session. I'm Lynn Abramson and I'm president of the Clean Energy Business Network, which serves as the small business voice for the clean energy economy. And we are one of the power connectors that works with the Department of Energy to help recruit and support applicants for various energy innovation programs, including the American-Made Challenges program, as well as the Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer Program. And that is what we are here to discuss today. So we really appreciate everyone joining us for today's office hours. And as I noted, I am recording this presentation just for those who are unable to join, but we will be separately later joining some breakout sessions. You can ask questions, and so you can feel free to ask those questions then, and we will not be recording that portion. So if you can please advance the slide, I'd really appreciate that. So I mentioned that our team works very closely with the Department of Energy. We also work with the Small Business Administration to help ensure that federal grant dollars for clean energy, technology innovation, and economic growth reach the broadest possible range of audiences, including a more representative range of the US population. And we want to make sure that every applicant knows about these funding opportunities and receives the support needed to successfully complete for funds. So that is why we're hosting this and future office hours to help prepare you for the next release of the Small Business Innovation Research funding. And I mentioned we will be going into some breakout sessions at the end of this call to answer any questions you have in depth. But I also welcome you to feel free to post any questions into the chat in the meantime, and we will try to address questions that are relevant to the full group. Next slide. So before we begin discussing how to prepare for SBIR, we want to make sure we're all on the same page and break down some important acronyms. In particular, because today's session is primarily geared towards first-time applicants or those that are somewhat new to the process. And if there are other acronyms or terms that you've seen and that you're unsure about, please feel free to put those into the chat and we will do our best to answer any questions you have about those. So first of all, there are two components of this program. There's the Small Business Innovation Research Program, which provides non-dilutive grants to help small businesses develop and commercialize technology innovations. And the related sister program is the Small Business Technology Transfer Program, which is a similar funding opportunity that is for partnerships between universities and small businesses. And these are advertised together. The funding topics are generally together and available to both sets. There are sometimes some differences. There are sometimes topics that are only available for SBIR and not STTR and vice versa. But for the most part, these programs go hand in hand. And the key difference is whether or not the small business is the lead or if there's a significant lead who is a university partner. And these programs are administered across all of the 12 major federal agencies that offer extramural R&D grants. Today, we're specifically going to be focusing on an upcoming funding opportunity from the Department of Energy that we want to help you get prepared for. So other acronyms we will be using are DOE, which can stand for Department of Education or Department of Energy, but in this case, we are specifically referring to the Department of Energy. When you see the term FOA, that means Funding Opportunity Announcement. And I'm actually going to clarify some of the differences in the stages of things, but the letter of intent is LOI. And then finally, sorry, my screen is off at the bottom there, the fiscal year. So FY is fiscal year. The current fiscal year is FY 2023, which started on October 1st of this year and runs through September 31st next year. So I'm going to cover some of the stages of these things in terms of the FOAs and LOIs in just a minute, but those are some key terms. Let me just pause now and see if there are any other questions. Again, feel free in the chat if there's other terms you'd like us to define, please put those in the chat and we can attempt to do so. Okay, so next slide, please. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Andy, to briefly cover some recent changes in the program that should be on your radar in case you're thinking about applying. And then we're going to go through the expected timeline and process for getting ready to apply.
Thanks, Lynn. So my name is Andy Barnes. I serve as Director of Policy and Communications at the CBN. So good news, Congress recently passed the SBIR and STTR Extension Act of 2022, and Biden signed the bill into law one day before programs were set to lapse. So this is really good news because the bill includes a 3-year extension of the SBIR and STTR programs. It also makes 2 changes that are, well, I would say 2 substantive changes. One is on foreign risk. So there were some current concerns about firms applying that had links to foreign entities. And so essentially applying firms are going to have to disclose those links before they apply going forward. And so those new standards will go into effect June 27th next year. In addition to that, there's increased standards for experienced firms, and that's going to go into effect April 1st next year. So those will impact firms that have over 50 Phase 1 awards to their names over the past 5 years. So we have a blog that is linked on this slide. So if there are any questions, please consult that blog.
Great, thank you so much, Andy. Just want to pause there, and if anyone is impacted by either of those changes, I'm guessing we probably don't have too many firms on this call that have received more than 50 awards, but the foreign ownership could, be relevant to some small businesses. So we are happy to try to unpack any questions that you have on those topics if that is relevant to your business. And definitely feel free to raise those during this call because this is an informational resource for everyone. We want to make sure that that information is useful for other businesses. So here is what we can expect in terms of the timeline. So today is October 31st. Happy Halloween to everyone. But next week, November 7th, we will see the topics come out from the Department of Energy in terms of the next SBIR, STTR solicitation. And so they will have they usually go into quite a bit of depth with those topics. They're broken down by technology and then specific kinds of challenges that the department is seeking to explore. And these can be quite detailed. So as soon as that topic announcement comes out, we recommend that you take a close look at that, scroll through, kind of look for areas that match your business's interest, and then read those topical areas. They're typically about 1 or 2 pages for each topic, and see if you think that it's a good fit for your company. And this is a good point to start writing down any questions or concerns that you have about whether or not you're a good fit. Once in a while, we do see some slightly more open-ended topics. So some examples are, in the past, we have seen the Solar Energy Technologies Office put out a sort of catch-all, if you don't meet any of these specific topics that we're looking for, here's another category. Last year, there was also a cross-cutting program across all the energy efficiency and renewable energy offices that was seeking to promote a just transition. We don't know if there will be some of these sort of open-ended, less prescriptive topics this year or not. But basically get ready, and as soon as the topics come out, take a look at them. Then the FOA, the funding opportunity announcement, will come out on December 16th. And this includes a lot more detail in terms of the rules, the requirements, what they expect to see in the funding package. But you don't have to wait until December 16th to get started on your application. And in fact, if this is your first year applying, I would recommend you get started as soon as possible so that you can see any questions that you may have. If you look at the website for the SBIR program, there are all of the previous FOAs for many, many years. And in general, the types of rules and requirements only change minimally from year to year. So if you were to look at last fall's solicitation, it should give you a good idea of the types of materials that you should be asked to prepare. And we're also going to talk about a key program that's called Dawnbreaker or Phase 0 technical assistance in just a moment. That is something that is freely available to any first-time SBIR or STTR applicants for the Department of Energy. And that will open on November 7th. And so we encourage you to get in the door for that early, as it is accepted on a first come, first served basis. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment, but just flagging that in terms of this overall timeline. We actually just learned today, this is, I think, not been announced publicly yet, but the Department of Energy, I believe, is going to be doing a topic webinar on November 7th. So we will make sure to get registration information out to all of you about that. But then in addition, there will be a webinar on December 16th unpacking the full FOA in more detail. So definitely keep an eye out for that and register for that so you have a better understanding of exactly what's going to be required of you. So then the first deadline for you to submit information is on January 3rd, 2023 at 5 p.m. Eastern time, and that is when the letter of intent is due. And this is typically a very short summary of your project. You have to put in some information about your team, kind of all the details for your business, and then this short description of what it is that you propose to do and which of the topic areas you are proposing to address. And this is really useful because then as of January 24th, if the Department of Energy determines that you are non-responsive, which means they think that the project you proposed is not relevant to the topic that you've proposed to address, they will tell you. So you will receive that notification on January 24th. If you don't hear anything, that means you should assume that you have been deemed responsive and you can proceed with a full application. I will say, even if you do receive that non-responsive notification on the 24th, you can challenge that. You can still submit a full application and respond and say, here's why we believe we are responsive. But you have to kind of weigh whether it is worth your time at that point and make sure that you clarify any sorts of confusion that might have led to that non-responsive determination. And then finally, the full applications are due February 21st at 11:35 p.m. Eastern time, a very specific time. We do recommend you try to get those in ahead of the deadline, as a lot of people can be logging into the system at that point, and it can just overwhelm the system, and you want to make sure that you don't get held up at the last minute due to any technical challenges. So next slide, please. So here are some general strategies for success that we would particularly recommend if this is your first time applying. You can go ahead right now and start getting registered with all of the systems that you will be needing to use to submit your application or to manage your award. So there's something called the SAM, the System of Awards Management, which is a place you have to be registered there before you submit the full application. So I would say to go ahead and start doing it now, well ahead of even the letter of intent deadline, because then you will see what you don't know and what information you need to compile to get in this system, because you want to make sure that you are in the system well ahead of the deadline, and it can take a few weeks. You also have to register at grants.gov, which is where you'll be managing your actual application itself. And then finally, PAMS, which I've actually forgotten what it stands for, but that's usually the place where you're managing the award itself. So try to just get registered early, gather up all the documents you need, and then feel free, we'll kind of show you some places where you can reach out for help, but you want to reach out and ask any questions you have well ahead of the deadline. As I mentioned earlier, you can get started right now. You can look at last year's topics and instructions to start getting a sense of whether you think this program is a good fit for you. Start writing down any questions you have. And there are also on the SBIR, on the DOE's SBIR website, some links that you'll see primarily on the left-hand menu on the screen to all sorts of templates and application checklists, submission instructions, and that's a good place to look for resources. Next slide, please. So I don't think it's advanced on my end, Annabelle.
Sorry, can you see? It's Strategies for Success Part 2.
Okay, sorry for that. I'm catching up here. So I just want to also now cover some of the resources that are available to assist you. One of the things I already mentioned is the Department of Energy's Phase 0 Dawnbreaker program. So just to cover what that is, you may have heard of something called Phase 0 at other agencies, and it doesn't necessarily have the same definition at other agencies as it does at the Department of Energy. At the DOE, specifically, this is a completely free technical assistance program available to first-time SBIR applicants for DOE. And as I mentioned earlier, it is available on a first-come, first-served basis as long as space is available. We have heard absolutely wonderful things about this program and would urge you to apply for that as soon as possible. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it on the next slide, but just going to hit on this point about 1,000 times to really urge folks to apply. There is also a resource called the American Made Challenges Network Matching Tool. And this is something that is managed by the American Made Challenges program, which is a energy innovation program from the Department of Energy, kind of related to SBIR, but this is a matching tool that has all sorts of nonprofits, incubators, accelerators, firms across the country that can provide different types of forms of assistance. And you can go on there, register your company, what kinds of assistance you're looking for, and match up with organizations that have those kinds of resources across the country. And this is important because there is a program within the SBIR that you can include in your grant application to get additional funds for technical and business assistance. And you can either go with a DOE provided vendor or choose your own. So you can actually use this tool to try to find an organization out there that can provide the right types of support for your company. There are also typically a lot of federal, state, and local resources available to help SBIR applicants. So we've included links to where you can find a local partner through your Federal and State Partnership Program, or FAST, as well as other local resources. So there's often a lot of procurement technical assistance centers, local organizations that can work with you and answer any questions you have about the process. And so they're a great resource. You can usually schedule either a Zoom meeting or an in-person meeting and go and sit with them to get started. And then finally, should you need specific types of assistance, such as graphic design support or proofreading or other types of assistance on your application, there are tools such as Upwork or Freelancer where you can often find people for hire to help you on that type of work. And then finally, we want you to also feel free to contact the DOE Power Connectors, which we will introduce you to in just a moment for other types of assistance. Next slide. So finally, the item I've been mentioning a million times, the DOE Phase 0 program I mentioned, it is free. It's a first come, first served basis. They can actually walk through that letter of intent process and help you review your application, just really provide a lot of in-depth hand-holding. This is the only place you can find such high degree of in-depth hand-holding, because the power connectors and other types of DOE partners are not allowed to provide unique assistance to one applicant versus another. This program is specifically designed to help answer any technical questions that you have about the application process. So it's going to be available as soon as the topics are announced at November 7th. So take a look at those topics, see if you think you're going to apply. And if so, go and sign up for this support. It's just a quick form where you fill out basic contact information about your organization, and that's it. So they can help you, I mentioned the application process, preparing and registering for all of those systems, those acronyms I mentioned, market research, and other types of information. It is only for first-time applicants, but even if you've applied before, there are a whole bunch of other, there's tutorials, recorded webinars on their website, and those can be a really great resource for refreshing your knowledge process. Next slide. I mentioned the American-Made Network's technical and business assistance matching tool. So there's the link to that. We will be circulating these slides and these links to everybody who registered, so you will have that. And that's a great place to find these so-called connectors, which are basically partners of the DOE, as well as power connectors, such as our organization, that work more closely with the DOE and can help you navigate the process. None of our organizations are actually a part of the Department of Energy. We are just external nonprofits, incubators, and partners. Next slide. So these are the power connectors that will be working in support of teams on the SBIR and STTR challenges. And I've listed the contact information for these various organizations. And we will be sharing this with all of you. So feel free to reach out to all of these teams, get to know their capabilities and how they might be able to assist you. We will also be compiling information on our website and sharing it with all of you about any sorts of events, office hours, webinars, or other types of resources that these power connectors will be offering to teams. Next slide. And getting close to the end, thank you for bearing with me. I mentioned that as you go through the materials, as you go through the FOA, the topics, if you have questions, you should start writing those down early and try to get those in early so that you're not scrambling at the last minute. And these are some resources where you can go to get your questions answered. And we found them to be very responsive and quick to reply. So as you start to navigate the grants.gov website, which is where you will actually be submitting your application materials, go to and start registering and have any questions, you can either call or email the information for grants.gov to get those questions answered. There's also a PAM's help desk, and then any other questions, including questions about the specific rules or the topics or requirements of the SBIR process, you can direct to the SBIR STTR at science.doe.gov. You will also find in the actual FOA that they, I think actually, no, it's usually in the topics document, you will find specific program officers who are responsible for that topic. These are the people at the Department of Energy who have written that topic and are experts. So usually their contact information will be provided as well, and you can reach out to them. They can't give you specific advice on your application, but for example, if you say, would an application that does X, Y, or Z be considered responsive to this topic? They can generally answer types of questions like that. So I would say, when in doubt, reach out and they will give you as much information as they can. They are very responsive, but do be aware that, you know, a lot of these deadlines are coming up over the holidays. People may be taking leave. So again, I urge you to get those questions in as early as possible to make sure that you have all the information you need before you begin delving into the application. Next slide. So just to flag a couple of the upcoming events, I mentioned these earlier, I misspoke. So it's actually November 14th will be the topics webinar. So the 7th is when the Department of Energy will come out with the topics. The 14th is when they will be having a webinar to explore those topics more fully. And then December 16th is the webinar on the full FOA. And we've included the link to the place where those webinars will be posted, and as well as a place where you can find all new events and resources as they are announced. And we'll be sure to be announcing those by email. Next slide. On a related topic, we also just want to flag that there is a separate but similar type of funding opportunity announcement specifically on hydropower topics. And this is coming out of some unique funding put in the bipartisan infrastructure law for hydropower related R&D. And the eligible entities are organizations, including colleges, that are supporting disadvantaged communities or underrepresented groups. There are some other eligible applicants, but those particular entities are specifically encouraged to apply. So we have included a link where you can read more about this FOA, and as more details are announced, we will be sharing that information. There is an informational webinar tomorrow, so you can register to join that. The concept paper is due December 1st and full applications March 5th. So this is something you can look at in parallel or separately from the SBIR application process if you are working in hydropower. Next slide. Okay, so in just a moment, we're going to go into breakout rooms with our CEBN staff to answer any questions that you might have about the process. I want to just see if my colleague Ali has been able to get the poll to work or not.
I have not, if you want to try launching it, Lynn.
Okay, I am going to just launch this one brief poll with 2 questions, just to give us a better sense of the demographics of those on the call. I'm just going to give that a few minutes. Thank you for everyone who is applying, and this will help us gear you to the best resources to support your company. And then we will be going in just a moment into breakout rooms to answer any questions you have in more detail. We'll come back to the group at the end for the last few minutes, just to kind of review the questions that we had in those breakout groups and just make sure that everybody is on the same page with that information. Okay, I believe everybody has answered the poll. So thank you so much for doing that. I'm just going to make sure we save our results and the poll. So I don't know if you can see the results, but it does look like we have a majority of first-time applicants here, so that's terrific, and most of you are planning to apply. So I'm really happy that you found this, and I hope that this webinar is a useful resource for you. So now I'm gonna have Ali break us up into the breakout rooms, and we will answer any questions that you might have in there.